So here we go. Let's recap a little bit of what we've learned so far. The Book of Enoch is based on a character, Enoch. It was written by Enoch, and it is referenced in the Bible in several locations. Enoch is a trusted scribe in his lineage, and therefore he was chosen by God to be the mediator for the angels who had left their first estate, as it says in Jude, which means left the position that they had originally been put in by God to be guidance for the people on the earth. And so they left that position of authority and ended up becoming defiled by mingling with women and having offspring that were the giants in the land. What I'm doing here with you, studying the Bible, the New Testament, the Old Testament, as well as the Book of Enoch, in my mind is sort of like what anthropologist or an archaeologist would do. An archaeologist digs through the dirt and finds little bits of pottery, shards of clay, and try and piece the pieces together to create a bigger image of what that culture looks like. And that's what I'm trying to do. We are so far removed from this time in the Bible and in the history of man that it's very much like trying to dig through the rubble and find the bits and pieces to fit together so that we can understand the past, our history, more clearly. Okay, so first, let's take a look at the lineage of Enoch and Noah, right? Because basically the story is about Noah, but Enoch was the scribe, the go-between, and we're going to catch up with Enoch in a second. But I want you to understand the lineage and how it all fits together. So hang on a second. The lineage from Adam all the way down to Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So this is the foundation of humanity. We see that Adam, who lived a total of 930 years, also lived at the same time as, all the way down to Methuselah. So Methuselah and Lamech were both born within the generation of Adam. So as long as Adam was alive, Adam was able to tell these stories about the garden and all the things that had happened to him. And Eve, of course. Eve was there to share her 2 cents. So they were able to pass down their experiences all the way down to Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, and Lamech. Now, Adam died just prior to Noah's birth, but this is a great illustration to understand that Adam was alive during the same lifespan as these other people, as described in the Bible. When I made this chart, I put together, on the left-hand side, you see the years that they were alive before they gave birth to this next generation, and then how many years they lived beyond that. And it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good scale of what that looks like. And the flood occurred during Noah's lifetime, but all of these other people had passed on prior to the flood, and Shem, Ham, and Japheth were the ones that are the original lineage leading up to our civilization today. And the Bible does go on to explain that lineage as well, so we might take a look at that in a minute. Okay, I want to start at chapter 10 in the Book of Enoch, and we'll start reading from there. And I want to pick out a few things, and maybe we can look it up in the Bible and make some further finds. Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One spake, and sent Uriel, the son of to the son of Lamech, and said to him, Go to Noah, and tell him, in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it. So, Noah, having foreknowledge, taught to him by his father Lamech, who also had foreknowledge, taught to him by his grandfather Enoch, and also the knowledge of Adam and Eve, because they were all alive at the same time. So as Lamech raised Noah, and also as he, was forewarned by God, he explained all these things to him, and Noah was prepared to build the ark. So let's look a little bit at what Noah was told by God. So I guess we'd have to begin at Genesis chapter 6. It says, when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took wives of all they desired and chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not forever dwell and strive with man, for he also is flesh, but his days shall yet be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God lived with the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every imagination and intention of all human thinking was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved at heart. So the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination and intention of all human thinking was only evil continually. And that would exclude Noah, right? But that means that the influence of these Nephilim, who had, been born to these fallen angels, had spread across the whole earth, that all mankind had been corrupted by their thought process, if not physically corrupted, in the seed of their being, as becoming offspring themselves, each next generation being defiled by these Nephilim. So the Lord said, I will destroy, blot out, and wipe away mankind whom I have created from the face of the ground, not only man, but the beasts and the creeping things and the birds of the air, for it grieves me and makes me regretful that I have made them. And that to me points back to where it says that the Nephilim had also defiled the animals. Let's look at that. Hang on a second. Okay, so we're in Enoch chapter 7, and it says, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. So they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. So that's why God had to destroy not just the humans, but also the animals in the flood. It was necessary to start over again with a new, more pure, the same old seed that he had began in Adam and Eve. It had become corrupted completely, not just the humans, but also the animals, all except for Noah and his family, who had been hidden away. As God had explained to Lamech, you need to raise him up, tell him to hide himself, okay? And this is a good example of where we are in the world today. The world is becoming corrupted, and we all need to hide ourselves from the corruption of the world. I'd say this is a very timely word. Okay, now I want to back up just a couple of sentences. Now it said here, they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, okay? I'm going to look up what an ell is and determine exactly what 3,000 ells looks like. So it says here, an ell is usually 45 inches from the length of a bent arm. from the elbow to the tip of the extended finger. So I'm sure that it would have been a man's extended finger, but so mine's not 45 inches. But it's saying that 45 inches is how big that was on a person at that time. Very interesting. So that implies right there that, is this right? Where is the origin of this? I mean, that's quite large. 45 inches? So it says, so 3,000 L's times 45 inches equals 135,000 inches. Let's divide that by 12 equals, oh my gosh, 11,000 feet? Is that right? No way. Okay, let's try this again. So 3,000 L's equals 135,000, which divided by 12 inches in a foot would mean, oh shoot. Okay, so if 3,000 L's equals 3,045 inch segments, right? 3,000 times 45 equals 135,000, okay? Now we divide that, 12 inches in a foot, that is 11,250. So 11,250 foot tall giants. That's insane. It's like so far beyond what we can grasp, you know? This is where it gets really strange and people cannot fathom this. But I mean, how many cultures around the world have the mythology of giants in them? I mean, think about it. We've got the English who had a little song, Fee Fi Fo Fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. It's all about giants. I mean, you know, the beanstalk, the kid who climbed the beanstalk to get to the giants. I mean, it's, okay, it sounds fantastical, but I mean, when all of the cultures of the world have this in their history. Okay, so we're going to go to Wikipedia. List of giants in mythology and folklore. It says this is a list of giants and giantesses from mythology and folklore. It does not include giants from modern fantasy fiction or role-played giants from those. See the list in the species of fantasy fiction. So Abrahamic religions and religions of the ancient Near East, African folklore, Armenian mythology, Australian folklore, Celtic mythology, Chinese folklore, Dutch folklore, English folklore, Finnish-Canadian folklore and mythology, French folklore, German folklore, Greek and Roman mythology, Iberian mythology, Indian religions, Japanese folklore, Malaysian folklore, North American folklore, Oceanian mythology, Persian mythology, Philippine mythology, Romanian folklore, Slavic paganism, South American mythology and folklore, and under other, let's see what else we have. The Book of Giants, Brodingen, fictional land of giants from Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Okay, that would be, yeah, fiction. So apparently there are others, you know, stories of fiction. So we've got Gog and Magog. That's biblical. Oh my goodness gracious. Gog Magog was listed in the Bible, but yet it says it's a legendary giant in Welsh and later English mythology. Oh my goodness. As an American, we aren't familiar with these things. You know what I mean? It's not taught to us in school. We don't have connections to those cultures. Gog Magog, I had no idea. So, I mean, here you go. We have a whole list, a whole slew throughout all the cultures of the world, basically. Okay, so reading on in chapter 8, it says, And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids and all kinds of costly stones and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. So here it starts to talk about, the knowledge that these fallen angels carried on with them, okay? And I do want to go into that. Chapter 9, verse 6 says, Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. So this knowledge was something that the men were striving to learn. And I'd say this was probably another reason why the flood had to occur, right? God had to put some limitations on just how far this degradation would go. Chapter 9, verse 7 goes on to say, And Samjaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates, and they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sin. So again, knowledge that they revealed to humans. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying, and making their suit to the gates of heaven. And their lamentations have ascended, and cannot cease, because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass. And thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them. And thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to thee. So that was Uriel and Raphael lamenting to God. So starting at chapter 10, it says, Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One spake, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, Go to Noah, and tell him, In my name hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it. And now instruct him that he may escape, and his seed may be preserved for all generations of the world. And again the Lord said to Raphael, Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Duael, and cast him there. So fast forward from there. All right, let's fast forward to chapter 13. And Enoch went and said, Azazel, thou shalt have no peace. A severe sentence has gone forth against thee to put thee in bonds, and thou shalt not have toleration nor request granted to thee, because of the unrighteousness which thou hast taught, and because of all the works of godlessness and unrighteousness and sin which thou hast shown to men. So this is another reference to the knowledge, unrighteousness that they have taught, and the godlessness and unrighteousness and sin which they have shown man. So this is where we left off before. The angels have gone to Enoch and asked him to be their mediator. So what was it that Enoch was petitioning? Let's see. And they besought me to draw up a petition for them, and that they might find forgiveness, and to read their petition in the presence of the Lord of heaven. For from thenceforth they could not speak with him, nor lift up their eyes to heaven for shame of their sins, for which they had been condemned. Then I wrote out their petition and the prayer in regard to their spirits and their deeds individually, and in regard to their requests that they should have forgiveness and length of days. And I went off and sat down at the waters of Dan, in the land of Dan, to the south of the west of Hermon. I read their petition till I fell asleep, and behold, a dream came to me, and visions fell down upon me, and I saw visions of chastisement, and a voice came bidding me to tell it to the sons of heaven and reprimand them. And when I awakened, I came unto them, and they were all sitting gathered together, weeping in Abel's jail. Chapter 14 goes on to tell us the dream that Enoch was given by God in response to the petition of these fallen angels. The book of the words of righteousness and the reprimand of the eternal watchers, in accordance with the command of the Holy Great One in that vision. I saw in my sleep what I will now say with a tongue of flesh and with the breath of my mouth, which the Great One has given to me, to converse therewith and understand with heart. As he has created and given to man the power of understanding the word of wisdom, so hath he created me also, and given me the power of reprimanding the watchers, the children of heaven. So God gave him some authority in that. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared thus, that your petition will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you. Yea, your petition will not be granted unto you. And from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven until all eternity. And in bonds of the earth the decree has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world, and that previously you shall have been seen the destruction of your beloved sons. And ye shall have no pleasure in them, but they shall fall before you by the sword. And your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written. And the vision was shown to me thus. Behold, in the vision clouds invited me, and a mist summoned me. And the course of the stars and the lightnings sped and hastened me, and the winds in the vision caused me to fly, and lifted me upward, and bore me into heaven. And I went in till I drew nigh to a wall, which is built of crystals, and surrounded by tongues of fire. And it began to affright me. And I went into the tongues of fire, and drew nigh to a large house, which was built of crystals, and the walls of the house were like a tessellated floor, or a mosaic, or checkered floor, made of crystals, and its groundwork was of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of the stars and the lightnings, and between them were fiery cherubim, and their heaven was clear as water. A flaming fire surrounded the walls, and its portals blazed with fire. And I entered into that house, and it was hot as fire and cold as ice. There were no delights of life therein. Fear covered me, and trembling got hold upon me. And as I quaked and trembled, I fell upon my face, and I beheld a vision. And lo, there was a second house, greater than the former, and the entire portal stood open before me, and it was built of flames of fire. And in every respect it so excelled in splendor and magnificence and extent that I cannot describe to you its splendor and its extent. And its floor was of fire, and above it were lightnings, and the path of the stars, and its ceiling also was flaming fire. And I looked and saw therein a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun. And there was the vision of cherubim. And from underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look thereon. And the great glory sat thereon, and his raiment shone more brightly than the sun, and was whiter than any snow. None of the angels could enter and could behold his face by reason of magnificence and glory, and no flesh could behold him. The flaming fire was round about him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around could draw near. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, yet he needed no counselor. And the most holy ones who were near to him did not leave by night nor depart from him. And until then I had been prostrate on my face, trembling. And the Lord called me with his own mouth and said to me, "Come hither, Enoch, and hear my word." So it's interesting. None of them could approach him, but God called Enoch close to him to hear his word. And one of the holy ones came to me and waked me. And he made me rise up and approach the door, and I bowed my face downwards. And he answered and said to me, and I heard his voice, "Fear not, Enoch. Thou righteous man and scribe of righteousness, approach hither and hear my voice, and go say to the watchers." So here we go. This is God telling Enoch what to go say to the watchers. "And go say to the watchers of heaven, who have sent thee to intercede for them." This is what he says. "You should intercede for men, and not men for you. Wherefore have you left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with women, and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men, and taken to yourselves wives, and done like the children of earth, and begotten giants as your sons? And though ye were holy, spiritual, living the eternal life, you have defiled yourselves with the blood of women, and have begotten children with the blood of flesh. And as the children of men have lusted after flesh and blood, as those also do who die and perish, therefore have I given them wives also, that they might impregnate them and beget children by them, that thus nothing might be wanting to them on earth." So it sounds to me like God is going to create a provision for them. Well, I won't let your children live eternally. They're not going to be able to live forever. But I will provide for them wives of their own. I mean, here they were, defiling everything in sight. So God had to, stop that somehow. So chapter 15 and verse 6 goes on to say, "But you were formerly spiritual, living the eternal life, and immortal for all generations of the world. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you, because you're spiritual." Angels, spiritual. "I've never given you wives. You didn't need them. For as for the spiritual ones of the heaven, in heaven is their dwelling. And now the giants, who are produced from the spirits and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. And on the earth shall be their dwelling." So now they are bound to the earth. Their spirits are going to be on the earth, even beyond their lifespan. Paranormal activity is all explained right here in the Book of Enoch, saying that the spirits of the Nephilim will go on to do this until the final judgment. It's all right here. So, so this is it. As a Christian, my whole life, I felt like, there's got to be more to the story. We're taught as children to trust God and read the Bible, right? And we do. We trust God, we read the Bible, we try to build faith, we try to walk in to be a good person and live a Christian life and, treat others the way you want to be treated and all the basics. And yeah, I understand that and I agree. Of course, all of that is important. But why? I mean, why is there hatred amongst these beings and God? So many people have fallen into Satanism because they think that God is the bad guy. It turns out that the devil's the good guy and he's the one who was wronged by God, and that's why we need to pursue that, which is so sad, because if they had the bigger picture, if people had a better perspective of the origin of demonic activity, what it really is, I feel like they'd have a deeper understanding and a stronger bond with God, more empathy for God's position, more understanding of what all the Old Testament is about. I mean, honestly, this whole Bible is based on the very origin of sin, and the fall of humanity is based on this story, the Book of Enoch. Goodness gracious. All right, so chapter 16, verse 2 goes on to say, "And now as the watchers who have sent to thee to intercede for them, who had been aforetime in heaven, say to them." So, I mean, that's the point right here. God is saying, okay, I created you angels to be for the people, to help them, to help guide them in their relationship with me, because ultimately it's all about having a relationship with God. So he's looking at this and saying, watchers who have sent thee to intercede for them. Enoch should not have been put in this position. Chapter 16, verse 3 says, "You have been in heaven, but all the mysteries have not yet been revealed to you. And you knew worthless ones, and these in the hardness of your hearts you have made known to the women. And through these mysteries, women and men work much evil on earth." So there it is again, this knowledge that they passed on. So from the tree of knowledge, I mean, honestly, that's the whole story. Very beginning, the whole story revolves around this knowledge, right? The tree in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was supposed to be refrained from, and yet Adam and Eve fell for it. The serpent in the garden talked them into going ahead and doing this thing, taking on this knowledge. And then if you go fast forward, you've got this passing on of the knowledge through the Nephilim, right? So here it is. You have this knowledge passed on from these angels, okay? They were in heaven. They knew how God had created the earth. They were there, right? If you read Job, it talks about, were you there when I did these things? God, when he's talking to Job, right? And but the angels were there. So they've created this situation where they're passing on this heavenly knowledge to man, humanity. God did not intend for man to have this knowledge, right? But yet here it is that God is saying to them, oh, you think you're so smart. You have all this knowledge that you can pass on to man, right? But he says right here, you've been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you. Yeah, you abode in heaven. Sure, you lived there for a while, but I didn't show you everything. I've held some back. He says, and you knew worthless ones. So the things that you knew weren't even important. And these, in the hardness of your hearts, you have made known to the women. And through these mysteries, women and men work much evil on earth. So, this is the origin of occult knowledge, okay? This is the origin of that hidden mystery religion that has been passed on through the generations. This is that same basis for every cult that you ever heard of. I mean, that concept of holding back the knowledge. Cults use knowledge, right? They hold it over their congregation so that they can maintain power over them. So chapter 16, verse 4 says, say to them, therefore, you have no peace. Chapter 17, and they took and brought me to a place in which those who were there were like flaming fire. And when they wished, they appeared as men. And they brought me to a place of darkness and to a mountain, the point of whose summit reached to heaven. And I saw the places of the luminaries, and the treasuries of the stars, and of the thunder, and in the uttermost depths, where were a fiery bow and arrows, and their quiver. and a fiery sword, and all the lightnings. And they took me to the living waters, and to the fire of the west, which receives every setting of the sun. I came to a river of fire, in which the fire flows like water, and discharges itself into the great sea towards the west. I saw the great rivers, and came to the great river, and to the great darkness, and went to the place where no flesh walks. I saw the mountains of the darkness of winter, and the place whence all the waters of the deep flow. And I saw the mouths of all the rivers of the earth, and the mouth of the deep. Chapter 18 says, I saw the treasuries of all the winds. I saw how he had finished with them the whole creation and the firm foundations of the earth. And I saw the cornerstone of the earth. I saw the four winds which bear the earth and the firmament of the heaven. And I saw how the winds stretched out the vaults of heaven, and have their station between heaven and earth. These are the pillars of the heaven. I saw the winds of heaven, which turn and bring the circumference of the sun and all the stars to their setting. I saw the winds on the earth carrying the clouds. I saw the paths of the angels. I saw at the end of the earth the firmament of the heaven above. So, it's interesting. I wonder if these are the things that God did not show the other angels. He showed to Enoch. I mean, think of the gall. The angels are like angry now. They're like, okay, so these are the things that God didn't show us. I saw the winds on the earth carrying the clouds. I saw the paths of the angels. I saw at the end of the earth the firmament of the heaven above. And I proceeded and saw a place which burns day and night, where there are 7 mountains of magnificent stones, 3 towards the east and 3 towards the south. And as for those towards the east, 1 was of colored stone, and 1 of pearl, and 1 of jacinth, and those towards the south of red stone. But the middle one reached to heaven like the throne of God, of alabaster, and the summit of the throne was of sapphire. And I saw flaming fire, and beyond these mountains is a region, the end of the great earth. There the heavens were completed. And I saw a deep abyss with columns of heavenly fire, and among them I saw columns of fire fall, which were beyond measure, like towards the height and towards the depth. When I read that, my first thought was the sun. These columns of fire falling, the coronal ejections, that kind of thing. And beyond that abyss, I saw a place which had no firmament of the heaven above, and no firmly founded earth beneath it. There was no water upon it, and no birds, but it was a waste and a horrible place. I saw there 7 stars like great burning mountains, and to me, when I inquired regarding them, the angel said, "This place is the end of heaven and earth. This has become a prison for the stars and the host of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire are they which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord in the beginning of their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times. And heaven was wroth with them, and bound them till the time when their guilt should be consummated, even for 10,000 years. Okay, so I want to stop right there. God is outside of time. He has no beginning and end. He knew the end from the beginning. So, he's showing him the location as if it's already happened, where these angels who have sent Enoch to go talk to God, he's showing that Enoch, these angels that are bound in this location eternally for 10,000 years. So, but it hasn't happened yet because God is outside of time. Does that make sense? All right, chapter 19. And Uriel said to me, Here shall stand the angels who have connected themselves with women, and their spirits assuming many different forms are defiling mankind, and shall lead them astray into sacrificing to demons as gods. Here shall they stand till the day of the great judgment, in which they shall be judged till they are made an end of. All right, let's read that again. And their spirits assuming many different forms. So here it shows their spirits assuming many different forms. So, demonic possession, maybe? Going from one form to the next over generations of time. That's what I imagine here. Defiling mankind, and shall lead them astray into sacrificing to demons and gods. All right. Have you ever heard of the origin of the battle between God and Satan? Let's see if we can't find that information. Hang on a second. I don't think that the original descent between God and these angels began here with, the humans. I think that it started before that. And we get a glimpse of this in Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 1. Let's start there. And the Lord came again to me, saying to Ezekiel, Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, thus says the Lord God, because your heart is lifted up, and you have said and thought, I am a god. So this is the prince of Tyre thinking of himself as a god. Now that to me sounds like demonic influence, right? The spirit of a demon in him. I sit in the seat of the gods, in the heart of the seas, yet you are only a man, weak, feeble, made of earth, and not God, though you imagine yourself to be almost more than mortal, with your mind as the mind of God. Indeed, you are imagining yourself wiser than Daniel. There is no secret, you think, that is hidden from you. So again, back to this knowledge, okay? And this is going somewhere, so hang with me. With your own wisdom and with your own understanding, you have gotten you riches and power, and have brought gold and silver into your treasuries. By your great wisdom and by your traffic, you have increased your riches and power, and your heart is proud and lifted up because of your wealth. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, because you have imagined your mind as the mind of God, having thoughts and purposes suitable only to God himself, behold, therefore, I am bringing strangers upon you, and the most terrible of the nations, and they shall draw their swords against the beauty of your wisdom, O Tyre, and they shall defile your splendor. They shall bring you down to the pit of destruction, and you shall die the many deaths of all the Tyrians, the people of Tyre, that are slain in the heart of the seas. Will you still say, I am a god, before him who slays you? But you are only a man, made of earth, and no god in the hand of him who wounds and profanes you. You shall die the death of the uncircumcised, by the hand of strangers, for I have spoken it, says the Lord God. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation over the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus says the Lord God, you are the full measure and pattern of exactness, giving the finishing touch to all that constitutes completeness, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Okay, this is God now, speaking to the spirit in the king of Tyre. Does that make sense? Here we go. Let's read that again. You are the full measure and pattern of exactness, giving the finishing touch to all that constitutes completeness, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. So this is how God created Lucifer. or, the light bearer, his chosen, his right-hand man, okay? This is the origin of the fall of the angels, all right? Prior to them even coming against these women, this is where it all began, the battle between God and his enemy within the angel ranks. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The carnelian, topaz, jasper, chrysolite, beryl, onyx, sapphire, carbuncle, and emerald. And your settings and your sockets and engravings were wrought in gold. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. You were the anointed cherub that covers with overshadowing wings, and I set you so. Meaning God made him beautiful and perfect and gorgeous with all this, decorative abode. You were upon the holy mountain of God. You walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire, like the paved work of gleaming sapphire, stone upon which the God of Israel walked on Mount Sinai. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until iniquity and guilt were found in you. Through the abundance of your commerce, you were filled with lawlessness and violence, and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you out as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and the guardian cherub drove you out from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was proud and lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I lay you before kings that they might gaze at you. You have profaned your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities and the enormity of your guilt by the unrighteousness of your trade. Therefore, I have brought forth a fire from your midst. It has consumed you, and I have reduced you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who looked at you. All who know you among the people are astonished and appalled at you. You have come to a horrible end and shall never return to again. Yeah, so there it is. It seems like the only thing that the fallen angels had to offer humanity was their knowledge. And the riches, of course. If you can convince them, he describes this angel as having, all these precious stones and gold, inlaid in gold, and all that sort of thing. It's just very interesting that this has gone on. That it is the draw of riches, the draw of wisdom, and the defilement of sexuality that causes man's downfall. It is driven by these demonic spirits who are grasping at some way to have authority and power, They want God's authority. It was pride that caused the fall of Lucifer. And yet, God is greater. God has a better plan for us as humans. And, the whole idea that we could have this knowledge and be able to resist the temptation of the draw of this knowledge, the draw of, riches and wealth, the sensuality that is, enticing to us. It's all demonic. So let's go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 10. This is the history of the generations or descendants of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The sons born to them after the flood were the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer, it goes on to mention them, the sons of Javan, not sure exactly how to pronounce that. We've got Elisha, Tarshish, so on and so forth. From these the coastland peoples spread. These are the sons of Japheth in their lands, each with his own language by their families within their nations. The sons of Ham were Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. And within that lineage, Cush became the father of Nimrod. And it says that Nimrod was the first to be a mighty man on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, the beginnings of his kingdom was Babel. So let's see if we can't pick up on that story. Chapter 11 says, and the whole earth was of one language and of one accent and mode of expression. And as they journeyed eastward, they found a plain or valley in the land of Shinar, and they settled and dwelt there. And they said one to another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. So they had brick for stone, and slime or bitumen for mortar. And they said, come, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top reaches into the sky, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And now nothing that they have imagined they can do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confound or mix up, confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from that place upon the face of the whole earth, and they gave up building the city. Therefore the name of it was called Babel, because there the Lord confounded the language of all the earth. And from that place the Lord scattered them abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So then it goes on into the lineage of their families. All right, so the Tower of Babel is another epic story. As in the Book of Enoch, I feel like there's a little bit of information missing from this story. So when looking at Nimrod, the idea that he became a Gibborim, somewhere I heard that he was supposed to be 2/3 Nephilim and 1/3 human. And I don't even know what the origin of that is, but how can you be 3 parts anything, right? I mean, when you have 2 parents, there can't be an odd number of something. It has to be multiples of 2. So it doesn't make sense unless there is a 3rd part that is spiritual. You know, the book of Genesis says, in those days and also afterwards, there were giants in the land, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of Eve and made wives and had the offspring, right? The giants. Through the book of Enoch, we know that the giants were then cursed to be bound to the earth eternally, which means that their spirits are here on earth. Even now, that they were held until the judgment day on this earth as spirits wandering. Therefore, Nimrod's choice to become a Gibborim, it's something that came upon him. If Nimrod was the king of that region of Babylon and Nineveh, you can read in the Bible the horrible things that Nineveh had been, accused of, and Babylon. So Nimrod, being a king who probably was seeking the knowledge of the angels, right, gained somehow the spiritual growth that made him a Gibborim, a Gibbor, right, a giant of some sort, a mighty one. He was probably spiritually empowered through a demonic possession. Now I want to read Deuteronomy chapter 32, a segment in that chapter that talks about how the earth was divided just before God selected Abraham. We know that the people had come together, that Nimrod had brought everyone together to build a tower to heaven, all right? And that this was after the flood, These are the first cities that were created after the flood. And people were probably still very concerned every time it rained. I mean, when you read about Noah, when they got off of the boat, it had rained for 40 days and 40 nights. I mean, when the ground appeared and he got off the boat, he's kissing the ground, saying, thank God. And so I can imagine this would create some trauma for people. I mean, they lived hundreds of years back then, right? And this memory would have lasted for quite some time. So the idea that they would build a tower to heaven to escape the next flood, if that was, going to be God's choice of judgment upon them, they must have known that they were in the wrong to be concerned about God's judgment, first of all. And second of all, the gall of them to imagine that they could build a tower to escape it. But in Deuteronomy chapter 32, let's read a little bit. Chapter 32, verse 1 says, Give ear, O heavens, and I, Moses, will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. My message shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the light rain upon the tender grass, and as the showers upon the herb. For I will proclaim the name and presence of the Lord, concede and ascribe greatness to our God. He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are law and justice. A God of faithfulness, without breach or deviation, just and right is he. They, Israel, have spoiled themselves. They are not sons of him, and that is their blemish, a perverse and crooked generation. Do you thus repay the Lord, you foolish and senseless people? Is he not your father who acquired you for his own, who made and established you as a nation? Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the children of men, he set the bounds of the peoples according to the number of Israelites. Okay, this passage right here. For the Lord's portion is his people. Israel is the lot of his inheritance. So Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9. I think we need to look at these in a different translation. Or maybe let's just take a look at what Michael Heiser has to say about this. So this is the book, The Unseen Realm, and it's written by Michael Heiser. Let's read a little bit about who Michael Heiser is. Michael Heiser is a scholar in the fields of biblical studies and the ancient Near East, and he's a scholar in residence at Faith Life, the makers of Logos Bible software. As of the making of this book, anyway, he was. Michael has an MA in ancient history from the University of Pennsylvania, and has an MA in Hebrew Studies and a PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic languages from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has published widely in scholarly journals and popular periodicals such as Bible Study Magazine, and he teaches ancient languages online at MEMRA. Learn more about Dr. Heiser and his writings at www.drmsh.com. So, this is one of those books that really helped change my paradigm, my whole understanding. It gave me so much more depth into my understanding of the Bible. It was invaluable in growing me in my ability to comprehend the Word of God. And I highly recommend this book to anyone who's able to get a copy. So get a copy. All right, so in this book on page 112, it says, the famous story of the building of the Tower of Babel is about much more than an ill-fated construction project and language confusion. The episode is at the heart of the Old Testament worldview. It was at Babylon where people sought to make a name or shum for themselves. The building of a tower that reached to the heavens, the realm of the gods. The city is once again cast as the source of sinister activity and knowledge. Genesis 11, 1 through 9 reads, "Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to each other, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone, and they had tar for mortar. And they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top reaches to the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the face of the whole earth.' Then Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that humankind was building. And Yahweh said, 'Behold, they are one people with one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. So now nothing that they intend to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand each other's language.' So Yahweh scattered them from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, for there Yahweh confused the language of the whole earth, and there Yahweh scattered them over the face of the whole earth." You'll notice right away that there's the same sort of plural exhortation going on in verse 7 as we saw in Genesis 1:26. I guess this is what he was talking about before. The verse has Yahweh proclaiming, "Let us go down and confuse their language." Oh, yes. As was the case in Genesis 1:26, the plural announcement is followed by the actions of only one being, Yahweh. So Yahweh scattered them. It's at this point that most Bible readers presume there's nothing more to think about. That's because other Old Testament passages that speak of this event tend to be omitted from the discussion. The most important of these is Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9. "When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, then he divided mankind. He fixed the borders of peoples according to the number of the sons of God." So when we read it in the other version, it didn't say according to the sons of God. And then chapter 32 verse 9 says, "But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage." Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9 describes how Yahweh's dispersal of the nations at Babel resulted in his disinheriting those nations as his people. This is the Old Testament equivalent to Romans 1, 18 through 25, a familiar passage wherein God gave humankind over to their persistent rebellion. The statement in Deuteronomy 32:9 that the Lord, or Yahweh's, portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage, tips us off as to that a contrast in effect and ownership is intended. Yahweh in effect decided that the people of the world's nations were no longer going to be in relationship to him. He would begin anew. He would enter into covenant relationship with a new people that did not exist yet, Israel. The implications of this decision and this passage are crucial to understanding how much of what's in the Old Testament. Most English Bibles do not read according to the number of the sons of God in Deuteronomy 32:8. Rather, they read according to the number of the sons of Israel. The difference derives from disagreements between manuscripts of the Old Testament. Sons of God is the correct reading, as is now known from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Frankly, you don't need to know all the technical reasons for why the sons of God reading in Deuteronomy 32:8 through 9 is what the verse originally said. You just need to think a bit about the wrong reading, the sons of Israel. Deuteronomy 32:8 and 9 harks back to events at the Tower of Babel, an event that occurred before the call of Abraham, the father of the nation of Israel. This means that the nations of the earth were divided at Babel before Israel even existed as a people. It would make no sense for God to divide up the nations of the earth according to the number of the sons of Israel if there was no Israel. This point is also brought home in another way, namely by the fact that Israel is not listed in the table of nations. He goes on to say in the next segment, the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. So what happened to the other nations? What does it mean that they were appointed as an inheritance according to the number of the sons of God? And who are the sons of God? As odd as it sounds, the rest of the nations were placed under the authority of members of Yahweh's divine council. The other nations were assigned to lesser Elohim as a judgment from the Most High, Yahweh. That this interpretation is sound is made clear by an explicit parallel passage in Deuteronomy 4:19 through 20, where Moses says to the Israelites, "And do this so that you do not lift up your eyes toward heaven and observe the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, and be led astray, and bow down to them and serve them, things that Yahweh your God has allotted to all the peoples under all of the heavens. But Yahweh has taken you and brought you out from the furnace of iron, from Egypt, to be a people of inheritance to him, as it is this day." Deuteronomy 4:19 through 20 is the other side of God's punitive coin, whereas in Deuteronomy 32:8 through 9, God apportioned or handed out the nations to the sons of God, where we are told God allotted the gods to those nations. God decreed in the wake of Babel that the other nations he had forsaken would have other gods besides himself to worship. It is as though God was saying, if you don't want to obey me, I'm not interested in being your God. I'll match you up with some other God. Wow. Psalm 82, where we started our divine council discussion, echoes this decision. That psalm was Yahweh judging other Elohim, sons of the Most High, for their corruption in administering the nations. The psalm ends with the psalmist pleading, "Rise up, O God, judge the earth, because you shall inherit all the nations." Maybe we should read this. Okay. Psalm 82 says, God stands in the assembly of the representatives of God in the midst of the magistrates or judges. He gives judgment as among the gods. How long will you, magistrates or judges, judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Pause and calmly think of that. Do justice to the weak, poor and fatherless. Maintain the rights of the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Rescue them out of the hand of the wicked. The magistrates and judges know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in the darkness of complacent satisfaction. All the foundations of the earth, the fundamental principles upon which rests the administration of justice, are shaky. I said, you are gods, since you judge on my behalf as my representatives. Indeed, all of you are children of the Most High. But you shall die as men and fall as one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for to you belong all the nations. Okay, so embedded in the Psalms, chapter 82. It's the full picture right there. God is saying, this is, your calling was to guide the people. But they didn't do it. They did not guide the people. And so they did not guide the people in righteousness. Instead, they guided the people in darkness. They guided them to learn the dark arts, to do the things that were negative. And again, it goes back to the occult knowledge that they weren't supposed to teach humanity. And they did it anyway. And this is why they were judged. So it all makes sense, We've got Deuteronomy 32, where God divided up the nations according to the sons of God. And of course, that's not in all the translations. In fact, very rarely do you come across that sort of translation. And it's not touched upon at church. Nobody talks about these things. The whole world at that time was divided up to these other gods who had put themselves in the position through their pride to be God on the earth instead of Yahweh. And so they were judged. And this is when God chooses Abraham for himself. He searches humanity and he finds someone who had the right heart. And he starts all over again. And this is the nation of Israel. Anyway, this is crazy stuff, for sure. I mean, if you're not aware of this, it can catch you off guard. But you know what all makes sense? It makes sense. Finally, the Bible starts to make sense. Why is it that we don't have the understanding? The root. Why is this not taught in seminary? You know what? Michael Heiser's message at the very beginning of this book is fascinating. He talks about how he was graduating seminary, and it was the day they were to walk the stage when his friend said, hey, take a look at this chapter in Psalm, the great counsel of God. What does that mean? And that started him on this journey of understanding. He was going to be a preacher that, just like all the other preachers, who don't have this knowledge, who haven't dug deeper to find the truth of the stories that are the foundation of our religious belief system. Instead, they are told what to teach, and they don't even have the foundations they need to tell us the truth. All right, here we are again. So we took a little detour from the Book of Enoch. I'm hoping that it makes sense to you, how it all fits together. And maybe we can read a little more of the Book of Enoch next time. I'll keep searching to find something interesting to share with you. I appreciate you taking a look at this video. And give it a like if you like it. Start a conversation in the comments. Give us your opinion on this. And I hope to see you next time. Thanks. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see what I can do to help bring you more information from the Bible. Have a good day.